Greetings one and all, this is Nazmia and here we are dealing with module 3 of cognitive psychology. In this video we'll be talking about the basic theories that explain perception. Specifically we'll be dealing with the theory of direct perception. Cognition is an umbrella term and perception comes under cognition. It is one of the cognitive processes. And there are many debates regarding the conceptualization of perception, like where should we draw the line between sensation and perception, how do we perceive, recognize these objects and events around us, and so on. So basically, perception is the process by which we recognize, organize, and make sense of the sensations we receive from the environment around us. And we have several theories that explains this complex process, which can be broadly classified into two different approaches. Okay, first one is bottom-up approach, and the second one is top-down approach. These approaches explain how we make sense of what we see and hear. The bottom-up theories explains perception as a stimulus-driven process. That is, we focus on the characteristics of the physical stimulus that we perceive and then we move upwards, attach meaning, recognize and do other higher functions. Okay, we learned 5 major theories of perception that that takes a bottom-up approach in this module. First one is theory of direct perception, second template theory, prototype theory, feature detection theories, and structural description theory. On the other hand, top-down approach holds the view that we construct our perception through our expectations. That is, we have certain expectations as per our previous learning, through the knowledge we have acquired through our experiences and so on. So, these expectancies create an unconscious anticipation of the objects or events that we might encounter or we might see or hear soon. These anticipations play a vital role in directing the exploration of our environment. For example, we expect to see a knife on a kitchen slab rather than a telescope. So, when we encounter an unexpected object like a telescope in the kitchen, our anticipation is violated and we scrutinize it immediately and perceive the object, here the telescope, using a bottom-up approach. So whether we use bottom-up or top-down approach depends on our perceptual circumstances. In a novel situation with a very good viewing condition, we might use bottom-up approach. In a poor ambiguous situation, we might rely on our prior knowledge and use top-down approach. Moving on to the first theory under bottom-up approach is the theory of direct perception, also called the ecological model proposed by James J. Gibson. For pattern recognition, according to Gibson, perception isn't a higher order complex process. Rather, perception consists of direct acquisition of information from the environment just around us. Simply stating, the sensory context or the information in our sensory receptors is all that we need for perception. Here, perception and sensation doesn't have any intermediating processes or higher order processes in between, and this theory is also called ecological model. Why? Because Gibson believed that the information required to perceive and judge the object around us is already available in the contextual cues in our environment, like the texture and gradient, which acts as depth cues to judge the relative proximity of the object from us. So the distant object might have different textures. For example, imagine a stone lying close to you and one that is lying far away. For the closer one, you will be able to see the fine details, the holes, crevices, and the fine texture of it. And for the distant stone, fewer texture or details will be available for you. And our brains are wired, or we are biologically tuned to respond to such environmental cues in the real world. Now we'll look at some empirical evidences for Gibson's theory. His wife Eleanor Gibson had conducted the landmark study of infant perception, which we all know as the visual cliff experiment. How the visual cliff experiment acts as an evidence for this theory is, in the experiment, the visual cliff experiment, Many infants were with very little experience in crawling hesitated to crawl across what seemed to be a cliff. So, how did these infants develop this perceptual awareness that it's a cliff and it's dangerous? The only explanation is that these abilities are inborn and the human brain is wired to perceive contextual cues to judge the environment around them, because these infants do not have too much experience about depth cues around them. They had just started crawling. Another evidence is that we use or recognize facial expressions, emotions of others within 30 to 100 milliseconds after encountering the visual stimulus using our mirror neurons. And we recognize these emotions like a confused face, smiling face, crying face. As such, directly we recognize the facial expression. We do not see the facial expression as parts and put together and as separate features and then later name or recognize or give name to these emotions on their face, right? We directly perceive these emotions. Also, some other phenomena that can be explained is the perceptual speed that humans have, and also illusions. Even when we know the rationale behind the illusions, yet we cannot unsee these illusions. Okay, these are some of the phenomena that can be explained using direct perception. And some of the phenomena that cannot be explained, or some of the pitfalls of this theory, is that some of the experiments suggest that there is a role of learning in developing some of the perceptual abilities like face recognition in infants. That is, infants by 5 years have the ability or learn to discriminate faces based on their own races. So, such things do not cannot be explained using direct perception. Also, cultural differences can be seen in some of the illusions like molar layer illusion, where some people or some categories of people who do not have exposure to carpentered walls or edges are not susceptible towards illusions like molar layer. So these cannot be explained using direct perception. So with that, we have come to an end of this video. Thank you for listening.